All right, moving on. Table of Nations. In Genesis chapter 10, we come to the Table of Nations. It's an astonishingly complete explanation of how Noah's 3 sons populate the known world. It lists 70 nations, all stemming from Noah. You've got the traditional descendants of Ham in yellow. They're mostly in Africa and Canaan. You've got the descendants of Japheth in orange. Traditionally, they're in Europe and in the north. And then you've got the descendants of Shem in green. Traditionally, they're in Asia. They're the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians. And then you have these cities in yellow that are all over the map that seem to be in territory that would otherwise belong to Japheth or Shem. What are all these cities in yellow doing in this territory? Well, that's because Nimrod, grandson of Ham, is credited with founding all the great cities, including Babylon and Nineveh. And in the book of Genesis, cities are evil. They are seen as nests of political oppression, idolatry, and above all, human pride. Now, later in the Bible, there are plenty of good cities. There's the holy city of Jerusalem, all the way to the heavenly city of God. Heaven is portrayed as a city. So are cities intrinsically evil? No. Are cities evil in the book of Genesis? Yes. Which brings us to the Tower of Babel. The word Babel means Babylon. It sounds like the Hebrew word meaning he confused. The story begins, at this time, the whole earth had one language and few words. And men found a plain in the land of Shinar. It's right there on your table of nations next to Babylon, the plain of Shinar. And they made cities. Da, 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 da. They developed technologies. Remember how it was the sons of Cain last week that were building cities and developing technologies? Now you get the sons of Ham doing the same thing. They discovered that you could build a much taller tower using baked mud bricks than you could using stones. There goes the neighborhood. So they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves. Do the people of Babel trust God? No! How do we know? They're building a city. They're not following God's command to fill the earth and subdue it. Think about it that way. That's one reason why cities in Genesis are bad. People are supposed to be spreading out. How else? They want to rival God by building a tower that reaches to the heavens. Remember last week when Adam and Eve wanted to rival God by eating the fruit? It's the eternal temptation to be like God through competition instead of obedience. Finally, the people of Babel want to make a name for themselves. They want to be great, not for their lives of faith and love. They want to be great by lording it over their fellow human beings and over God himself. Let's get a little historical context here. The Tower of Babel is most likely a ziggurat. In ancient Babylon, these ziggurats were pyramid-like temples, and they were thought to be points of contact between heaven and earth. Abraham himself would have seen one every day growing up. That ziggurat right there, the great ziggurat of Ur, was built 200 years before his time. When the king of Ur, Abraham's hometown, proclaimed himself a god, built an empire that encompassed much of Mesopotamia, and built this ziggurat to honor the moon goddess. So, historically, what are we seeing here? Idolatry, forced labor, political oppression, unquenchable pride. That's what the Tower of Babel is preaching against. Stop the insanity. So, what is God's response? Well, God peers down from heaven through his binoculars at their tiny little tower and their tiny little city. He's so unimpressed. He declares an end to their pet project. He confuses their language and scatters them across the earth to limit the damage pride can do. The people had said before, let us make a name for ourselves, or we will be scattered across the face of the earth. Ironically, it's their pride that causes them to be scattered across the face of the earth. Also ironically, No names of people are mentioned in the story. They are all forgotten. God is the one who gives a great name. Remember Shem, the good son of Noah? The word Shem means name. God is about to choose one of Shem's descendants and give him a great name. That's Abraham. Any thoughts on the Tower of Babel? And like I said, it's only in Genesis that cities are evil. This is going to be a repeated theme throughout Genesis. Later on in the Bible, you get good cities, cities where God's people live, gather, create culture, spread the word of God, build the temple, and so on and so forth.
You said something, Babel comes from Babylon?
Babel comes from Babylon. It's the word Babylon. It could be, no, it really could be this ziggurat of Ur that's being referred to in the Tower of Babel story, or it could be a different one. But that's what it's based on. This ziggurat of Ur, it's still there. You can go visit it. The top's been lopped off, but the enormous, multi-story high foundation is still there. That's a really good point. And the best answer I have for that is that in some of these early stories, like Noah and the Tower of Babel, God is rescuing humanity from itself. In both of these stories, in Noah and in the Tower of Babel, you've got the entire human civilization headed for self-destruction. Before the flood, you've got the whole world being bent on wickedness, except for Noah. God steps in to rescue humanity. A lifeboat operation, if you will. Then again, at the Tower of Babel, you've got humanity bent on not filling the world and subduing it, but on being in one place, on stomping on each other, and on clawing for preeminence, and on bringing down God from the heavens. And God says, I can't let them do this. And he forces them to scatter. He forces them to stop clawing at each other and oppressing each other and storming the heavens. This is where God disciplines his sons. And these are the early stories we're hearing of God disciplining his children whom he loves. And what we're hearing are just the craziest low points, if you will, of human prehistory. Once we get to the story of Abraham, now we're entering recorded history. Now we're entering identifiable time, place, culture, and civilization. And the stories get a lot more nuanced.